Have you ever wondered what you can do in 38 minutes? In 2012, Felix Baumgartner jumped from the edge of space, free-falling 24 miles back to Earth in just 9 minutes, meaning he could have done that nearly 4 times in 38 minutes. In 1983, a Concorde flight flew from London to Paris in just 29 minutes and still have time for a croissant or a coffee.
It's the most normal one. I mean, it's...
You could watch a whole episode from your favorite show like The Office.
There has been a murder, and you are a suspect.
Or maybe even if you're in good shape, you can run around 5 miles in 38 minutes. But why are we telling you this, you probably wonder? Well, here's something even crazier you could do in this time. You could start and finish a whole war. On August 27, 1896, the British Empire and the Sultanate of Zanzibar managed to do just that, waging the shortest war in history, lasting only 38 minutes. Let's dive into this remarkable and slightly ridiculous historical moment where an entire conflict was fought faster than some pizzas be delivered.
Pizza time.
You're late. I'm not paying for those.
Before we get into the war itself, we have to understand how the war started. The Sultanate of Zanzibar was an island nation off the coast of East Africa, rich in spices, ivory, and strategically located for the booming Indian Ocean trade routes. During the 19th century, Zanzibar became a focal point of European imperial ambition, particularly between the British and the Omani Sultanate, which had long controlled the region. In 1890, Zanzibar became a British protectorate following an agreement with Germany, which had control over Tanganyika, modern-day Tanzania. The British installed Sultan Hamad bin Thuwaini, a pro-British ruler, on the throne to maintain stability and ensure their influence over the island. But this relationship would soon face a crisis when Sultan Hamad suddenly died on August 25, 1896. His successor, Sultan Khalid bin Bargash, was not the British's choice, and this would lead to the shortest war in history. When Khalid bin Bargash seized power after Hamad's death, the British were immediately concerned. Khalid, unlike his predecessor, was not sympathetic to British interests. The British had already decided that they wanted another pro-British candidate, Hamoud bin Mohammed, to take the throne. Khalid's rise to power was seen as a direct challenge to British authority. British officials quickly delivered an ultimatum to Khalid, demanding that he step down and vacate the palace. Khalid, however, refused to yield and began fortifying the Sultan's palace with an army of around 3,000 men, including a small artillery force. On the morning of August 27, 1896, the deadline for the ultimatum passed, and the British decided to act. The war officially began at 9:02 a.m. on August 27, 1896. At this moment, the HMS St. George and HMS Philomel, two of the British ships stationed in the harbour, turned their guns toward the Sultan's palace. Khalid, determined to hold on to power, had barricaded himself inside the palace, but his defences were no match for what was coming. In these first few minutes, approximately 30 shells rained down on the palace and surrounding defensive positions. The heavy artillery fire immediately started causing damage to the palace's structure, with walls collapsing and fires beginning to break out. Khalid's men tried to return fire with their outdated cannons, but they were hopelessly outgunned and outmatched. As the bombardment continued, the Zanzibari defenders fired a handful of shots, but their cannons were so ineffective that many of the British ships remained untouched, and no significant damage was inflicted. One of the next targets for the British was the Zanzibari Navy, though calling it a navy might be an exaggeration. The entire fleet consisted of a single ship, the HHS Glasgow, a wooden vessel that had once been a yacht. By minute 6, the British had turned their guns on the Glasgow, and within a matter of minutes, the ship was set ablaze by direct hits from British shells. By minute 10, the Glasgow had sunk in the harbour, marking the total destruction of the Sultan's naval forces. The quick elimination of the Zanzibari navy left Khalid with no escape by sea and demonstrated the overwhelming superiority of the British forces in both firepower and tactics. As the bombardment continued, the British fired roughly 500 shells in total during the conflict, and by minute 15, the Sultan's palace was rapidly disintegrating. British guns, firing at an almost constant rate, destroyed much of the palace's upper floors, leaving large portions of the building in ruins. Despite the overwhelming odds, Khalid still refused to surrender at this point. During minutes 21-30, British forces intensified their bombardment to destroy the last pockets of resistance. Several more shells hit key defensive positions, and with each passing minute, the Sultan's forces were pushed back further into the rubble of the palace. At this point, around 500 Zanzibari soldiers had been killed, while British casualties were almost non-existent. Khalid's forces had no answer to the overwhelming might of the British warships, and by minute 30, the Sultan's situation was completely hopeless. Just before minute 38, he fled the palace and sought refuge in the German consulate, where he was granted asylum. As soon as Khalid left, his remaining troops surrendered to the British forces. At 9:40 a.m., exactly 38 minutes after the war had begun, the conflict was officially over. The British had won an overwhelming victory with minimal casualties, while the Sultanate of Zanzibar had been utterly defeated. The palace lay in ruins, the navy had been sunk, and Khalid was now in exile. In just 38 minutes, the British had demonstrated their dominance, solidifying their control over Zanzibar and installing their preferred sultan, Hamud bin Mohammed, who was loyal to British interests. While the war lasted just 38 minutes, its history highlights the incredible disparity in military power between the British Empire and the small, independent nations it controlled. The Anglo-Zanzibar War is a reminder of how empires used not only politics and diplomacy, but also sheer force to maintain dominance. For the British, the war was an easy victory, and it ensured their continued influence over East Africa for decades to come. For Zanzibar, it was a devastating and humiliating defeat that left the island firmly under British control. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the Anglo-Zanzibar War, the shortest war in recorded history. If you enjoyed this video, please take a moment to like, subscribe and share it with fellow history enthusiasts. Your support helps us bring more of these unique moments from the past to life.
Help me help you.
And now we have a question for you. What would you do next time you have 38 minutes of free time? Let us know in the comments. As always, this is HistoryCrafts, where history crafts itself.